Hi, I'm Katherine Sprung, owner and founder of Squish Marshmallows. Today we're going to be making whoopie pies. I'm super excited for everybody to join today to make whoopie pies. In case anybody is not familiar with whoopie pies, they're a really great kind of Americana dessert, and sometimes the flavors vary for the little shells. I call them cakey cookies, which you'll notice on the recipe. The reason for that is they're not quite a cookie and it's not quite a cake. Legend has it that this recipe was started by the Amish, and they kind of developed this, what I call cakey cookie, from scrap pieces of leftover cake and batter. So it kind of has that texture, which is super unique to it. And then there are lots of different variations for the filling. We'll go over some of the different types that we have that you can do. It's really pretty adaptable. So if one thing is kind of not what you're into, there are great substitutions. Today we're going to be doing a Swiss meringue buttercream. That happens to be my favorite for this, for a couple reasons. The texture of it, it's a really silky, smooth frosting that is just fabulous on cakes and everything, and then the whoopie pies. And it's not very sweet. It's not sour or salty or anything like that, but it's not overly sweet, which is really great too, especially if you want that nice kind of sweet tooth hit, but not to where you have a toothache. That's going to be your Swiss meringue buttercream. So we'll go through how to make that. You could also substitute it with American buttercream, which is a much simpler process with fewer ingredients. So that's available as well. And then you could also, another classic version of that is with marshmallow fluff or marshmallow cream, whatever you want to call it. We actually make our own here at Squish Marshmallows. We ship nationwide as well. So if you don't want to go through the trouble of making anything other than the cakey cookies, then we can send this to you. This one, I'll try and get a little close. I'm not super close to the camera right now, but I think that's pretty okay. This is our vanilla flavor. We have a cookies and cream. We have strawberry, which would be delightful with the chocolate, I think, and a vanilla confetti as well. And stay tuned. We might have some other fun flavors popping up for seasons, holidays. So stay tuned for that. So this is another option as well. But we'll get down to what we are making today. So I have all of my ingredients portioned out just to be mindful of time and conscious of everybody else's time. But we'll walk through everything. And then of course, you'll be able to see this video at your leisure any other time if you choose to make it on a later date or just want to check back and make sure that everything was okay. So let's go ahead and get started with our cakey cookie shells that I call them. The first thing that we want to do is we want to take our butter and our sugar and cream that. And so essentially what that is it's making it light, fluffy, getting lots of air into it, giving it that fluffy texture so that you're not left with something dense or anything like that. And that's going to give it just a really nice texture and consistency. So if you have a stand mixer, that is what I would definitely prefer. For myself, but if you have a hand mixer, that's going to work really well as well. I would say if you have Popeye's biceps, then you could do it perhaps by hand, but it is pretty labor intensive and you know, it might be a little challenging. So if you have either of the two, you are good to go. We're going to start with our butter. So I have 3/4 of a cup of room temperature butter is what we're going to want. And I have on the recipe there some little hacks, because sometimes recipes I feel like say room temperature, and then it's like, well, gosh, if my butter's been in the fridge and I just really want to make something on the fly, how long do I have to wait? What do I have to do? So great tip. If you have a microwave, you can just pop your butter into the microwave in 10-second intervals and just kind of, you know, give it a feel to make sure that it's not too melted. What you want is so that your finger can kind of indent into the packaging or the butter itself and make a little bit of a mark, but not, you know, melted. That's what you're going for. So that's a great little hack that you can do. So we're putting that in here. And then we're going to grab our sugar. I have 1 cup of white granulated sugar. And we're going to just add that in to our mixing bowl. And we'll just pop this into place. And if it gets a little loud and it's a little hard to hear me, I'll try not to talk too much while this is mixing. We'll lock this into place and get this going. We're gonna start super slow because you don't want a huge poof of any of your ingredients. It'll be messy, you'll lose something. So always start slow. And then once you start to see that your ingredients are incorporating, I'll take a break in a second and kind of show you at what point you're going to want to turn the speed up higher. So right here are, and this is just been at the stir speed, so super, super slow. But I'll just give you a quick look just so you can kind of see real quick, hopefully. Let's see if we can show you. Yeah, so kind of looks like Play-Doh. So you don't see any sugar still swishing around in there. Everything's incorporated. At that point, when it starts to have that Play-Doh-y consistency, then we can turn it up. You don't have to go at full speed. I think that'll be a little bit much for this, but every mixer is calibrated a little bit differently. So for me personally, and this particular mixer, we're at speed 6, if that's helpful. But of course, you know, go with whatever speed your mixer is reacting to the best. We're gonna cream this for a little bit. I would say a few minutes. We're gonna check back in with it. You kind of also have to go by look. We're gonna take a break in a second, scrape down some of the sides, and then start it back up again. The point of that is to just make sure they're a little, kind of like a little indentation at the bottom of the bowl, and sometimes some butter can get, you know, locked into that bottom, and we just want to make sure that everything is fully incorporated into there. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break here. It's starting to look really nice and fluffy though. I will show you again what I'm getting so far. So kind of hard to see exactly what that is, but that is the butter and sugar, and it's sticking, it's not moving around. It's looking paler, which is good. That's what we want. So that you just think of light all around. So it's gonna lighten up in color and lighten up in texture. We are going to grab a little spatula, or if you have a spoon, whatever you have available. I think really the name of the game is adaptation and making sure that you have things that work for you. And if it provides the same results, then great. So we're just going to scrape down the sides a little bit, well, a lot of it, so that everything is kind of pushed back down into the center bottom of the bowl here. So we've got a nice little mound back there again. We're just gonna pop this back in and let it work its magic a little bit more. While that's working, so we can multitask a little bit, because here you let the mixer do the magic. Now, of course, if you have a hand mixer, then you do them each in steps, and that's totally fine. But for everybody's timing, we'll multitask a little bit. So, all right, so we've got this going. We're going to then, let's sift in our dry ingredients. So in here, I've written all of our ingredients that we have. I know you guys can't see this, but I can, so I don't forget anything. In here, we've got our dry ingredients. So this is gonna be our flour, our baking soda, our baking powder, salt, and cocoa powder. So when it comes to cocoa powder, I definitely recommend when you are baking using a Dutch cocoa powder. Don't let that scare you. You can find it in any grocery store. You can find it online, no problem whatsoever. It is going to give us that, that really nice depth of flavor, but it also reacts a lot better when you're baking. Just a little bit of science there. I think in the meantime too, I'm gonna slow down our butter and sugar, one, so you can hear me a little bit better, but also I think we're kind of where we need to be, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But we have all of our ingredients here, and if you have a sifter, this is going to be wonderful. If you don't have one, it's okay. It's not the most, you know, essential thing, but if you have one, I definitely recommend using this because it's just going to take out any little clumps and anything like that and just give you just a very, very smooth mixture, which is what we want. So we've got all of those out of our cup and into just a large bowl is all you'll need. And we're just gonna do exactly that. I'm just gonna sift it all in there. It's just going to incorporate everything really nicely. And like I said, sometimes, and perhaps I'll be able to show you once we've got almost everything out of here. Sometimes too with the cocoa powder, it can get a little bit, yeah, you can perhaps see. So we've got a bunch of that stuff still in there. So what this is actually doing is making sure that everything is sifted nice and powdery and smooth. So we can just take the back of a spoon, your hand, whatever you like, and you can just kind of gently press it up against the grating like that. And then that's going to do the exact same thing, except move it along a little bit faster because they will not go through that grating on their own. All right. So we've got a nice, beautiful mixture here. So we're just going to put that aside for 1 second. Let me just move this out of my way. All right, we've got now our creamed butter and sugar. I shall show you what that looks like. So pretty similar to the last time, but it is just a bit lighter and fluffier. So that's going to be great. So let's go ahead and scrape this down as well. Again, any time that you have ingredients that have kind of raised up the side of the bowl or anything like that, it does help to take little breaks to just move it down there to make sure all of your ingredients are nicely incorporated. So what we're going to do now is we are going to kind of in different stages take wet ingredients, which I have here and we'll go over, and do them in kind of little segments with the dry ingredients. So for our wet ingredients, we have, now you can do different things here. Traditionally, you can use buttermilk, but sometimes if you don't want to make the special trip or already happen to have buttermilk, another little hack is if you do have milk, and also at the same time, some cream of tartar, you can kind of hack that and make your own faux buttermilk, but it will give you the same results. There are the ratios and proportions in the link in the chat, as well as in the form that you registered in too. So you can have all of those fun hacks that way too if you don't happen to have buttermilk. And this is mixed with our coffee. The coffee just really gives it, it's an additional bit of that wet ingredient that we do need, but it also gives chocolate that really great depth of flavor too. I think they pair together so wonderfully. So, you know, if you don't, there's not much of it. So even if you're not a big coffee person, you're not going to really taste it. If you know caffeine is not your thing, you can use decaf, whatever works for you. Again, this is just really making things simple and easy for you. So we're going to do that with 1 room temperature egg, and I also have another hack on there for getting room temperature eggs, because most of us are going to have them in the refrigerator already. So you know, if you don't want to think about how long it's going to take to get that to room temperature, if you know you want to do something on the fly, then you can just take a little dish or a little bowl of some warm water. It does not have to be boiling. It does not have to be scalding hot. Just a little bit of warm water, and set the eggs in there for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then just, you know, check in on them, give them a feel. And if they've definitely cooled down a lot and they feel really just room temperature, then you've got exactly what you need. So never worry if you know, just look in your fridge and you're like, oh gosh, my eggs are definitely cold. What do I do? So that's exactly what you can do. So we've got our egg. We've just mixed it in there. Again, I'm just using a measuring cup, so you can really use, this is not fancy equipment. You can really use whatever works for you. So we've got that incorporated. And we're just gonna do this in little segments. I like to start with the dry ingredients in there first. What I would recommend is, since this stuff is really powdery and light now, it likes to fly all over. So that's why we do these in segments. So you just have to be patient with the process. It'll probably take about 5 rounds or so to get everything in there incorporated. But trust me, you will be happy when you have to do less cleanup at the very end. So we're just gonna scoop. This happens to be a half cup scoop, if that is helpful at all. I would not go more than that initially. You can even take a little bit out if you want. You might see it start to poof up. It's inevitable. If you do have, I have one over there, but we're not going to grab it right now. One of those guards, you can totally use that too. Again, whatever works for you, whatever's easy. I feel like sometimes people stress about baking, so let's take as much of that out of there as possible. So we're just gonna put this on stir. Do not go full speed. You will be wearing all of your ingredients, which you'll smell fabulous, but it might be a pain in the butt to clean out later. Another great thing about just preparing your wet ingredients in a mixing or a measuring cup is just the ease of pouring it in. Sometimes recipes call for bowls like this and things like that, and it can just kind of get messy and whatever. This, I feel like, it's just more controlled. So we just stop that, and always make sure to, if you're feeling rebellious, I'm not going to stop you, but I like to stop the mixer in between each thing, just again, to avoid any splashback. So we're just going to add some of our wet mixture. And again, we're just portioning it out in equal increments so that everything is just getting incorporated slowly but nicely. We're going to get another scoop of this dry mixture in here. And I didn't mention initially, it is in the recipe, but you're going to want to turn on your ovens if you're baking live to 375. The cool thing about this recipe too, sort of like cookies, is that it really doesn't take very long to bake, which is amazing. If you're slightly impatient when it comes to desserts like myself, you can have almost instant gratification. You will need to allow your different products, your finished products, to cool down. We'll talk about all that in a moment. I've produced a little bit of TV magic so that I can show you how to arrange and compile all of your finished products, because the Whoopie Pies, when they come out, are going to be warm, of course, and you want them to cool down before you can add on any of well, anything that you choose, right? So if you want to do the Swiss meringue buttercream like we're doing, the main ingredient, well, the main ingredients there are sugar and butter, and both of those things melt very fast. So you definitely want something that is not warm even, because then it's just kind of gonna melt there. You could always speed up the process by after the shells, the cakey cookie shells are kind of out of the oven for a few moments. You don't want them piping hot, but then you can pop them into your refrigerator or the freezer for a number of minutes, and that'll help cool it down a lot. Just make sure you don't put them next to like any butter or eggs or milk or anything like that. And that's another little hack that you can do as well. So I think we've gone through about half of our ingredients so far. Like I said, patience is kind of just the name of the game here. You just want to make sure that everything is nicely incorporated and that it does not get all over you or your kitchen table or anything like that. So we're just doing this as responsibly as we can. And I'm going to be showing you after this how we'll prepare them on our sheet pan. And then we'll jump into our Swiss meringue buttercream. I'm going to show you the biggest bulk of all of the steps within that. It does require quite a bit. I believe it is 2 pounds to be exact of butter. That might sound scary, but it's going to create a nice amount. You are definitely going to have maybe some leftovers and things like that. So you can use it for all sorts of things if you're making little cupcakes, or if you want to do old school like Dunkaroos and some little cookies or crackers or something like that, you can definitely use it for a lot of different things. So it produces enough for sure for these, and then a little bit extra, so you're not left wanting more. All right, we just have maybe a couple more rounds of this to go. And then I'll be able to show you what our consistency looks like. I always misplace things that I put somewhere, but I end up finding them. So, all right. And I think perhaps you can kind of see a little bit as I'm taking it out, we're getting a really, really nice texture here. So this is exactly what we want, which is good because I'd be very embarrassed if it was wrong while I have all of you joining me here. But it's a really, really great consistency. And you'll see too, if you're making this along with me at home or on a later date, that it really is that kind of melding of consistency of cookie dough and cake. It's lighter and airier, and but still has some substance to it. All right, I think we've got about maybe 1.5 more mixtures to go. It perhaps is not the most exciting thing, but if you do happen to have any kids at home, this is a great activity for them because it's really straightforward. You can just kind of let them take a little scoop, add it in, add a little bit of the mixture. So it's super, super easy. Anybody can do it. You can make it more interactive if you want. If not, honestly, it's pretty therapeutic, I think. I know that they say, what is it? The stress backwards is desserts. So I say just, you know, load yourself up with lots of delicious desserts and that takes the stress away. I'm not a doctor. Do not like follow my medical advice, but I think it definitely adds some therapy in baking it and following the steps and everything. And then of course, my favorite part, eating them. So we are just about done. We just have only a little bit left here of our wet ingredients. We've got those added, and then we'll finish it off with that little tiny bit we have left of the dry ingredients. And because there's hardly anything left right now, I'll just be able to pour the rest of the bowl in. We'll just lift it up so it fits nicely in there. And that is all of our ingredients. All right, and again, like I said, what we're gonna wanna do now that things are nice and incorporated, let's just clean this spatula off a little bit. It's just got some extra butter and sugar, and what we wanna do is make sure everything is incorporated. So I'm just going to push some of this out so that we can also make sure it's nice and incorporated, but also so that I can show you what I'm talking about. So here's the batter. And I know that the lighting is a little bit funny, but I think right around the edges, you can kind of see where some of that cocoa powder is. So it's a little hard to see, but I think you might be able to see some of it. So that's good stuff. So we want to make sure that that's in there. So we're just going to do the same thing we did before when we creamed our butter and sugar. And we're just going to scoop all of that down in there. And we'll just give this another spin just so that everything's nice and incorporated. You just don't want any little pockets or poofs of cocoa powder in there. You just, because then what's going to happen once it bakes and you take a bite and then there's a weird crumble of cocoa powder, it's not going to kill you, but it's a weird experience. And you just, if you can avoid it, I say why not? So we'll scrape all of this back in there. We'll just give it a nice spin. You don't need to go crazy. And with this too, don't go full speed. We've already creamed the butter and the sugar, so you do not need to worry about that. Here, we're just incorporating the ingredients. So everything looks good to me now. So what you want to do is grab your sheet pan. I have mine here. And I recommend one of two things, either a silicone mat like this, which are great, eco-friendly. You can reuse them time and time again. Their whole point is that they are heat resistant. So I think they can go up to 450, 500 degrees, which you're probably not cooking a lot of things or baking a lot of things higher than that anyway. So these are great. If you don't have one of these, no problem. Parchment paper is what you're going to want to use. You don't want to use wax paper because that's not going to work well in our oven. So parchment paper is what you're going to want to use if you want to even easier clean up, or these silicone mats here. Now, when it comes to portioning, you know, you can be a little bit more generous with the size of your shells, or more controlled. For me personally, I think that I would recommend for them to be as uniform as possible. That way your top shell and your bottom shell kind of match up nicely. You can of course do a variety of some smaller ones and some larger ones. Totally, just make sure that you have equal proportions of both. So I'm only scraping this down a little bit, just so I have kind of like the batter in the center. It is a little bit hard to show you the consistency, but perhaps I can just kind of show you it's kind of stuck on there. It's not runny or anything like that. But it's still light and fluffy, but with substance. So I like to use one of these little cookie scoopers. Super easy for this. And I would say that this is probably like 1.5 tablespoons, maybe borderline 2 tablespoons. So if you don't have a cookie scooper, no problem. If you want to use just kind of as a mimic to that, I would grab a tablespoon and just use 2 of those into your mounds. So we're just going to go ahead. We're going to scoop this. I like to scrape, might be a little bit hard to see, but I just like to scrape the sides just so we have as clean as a mound as we can get. But I'm going to show you another little hack that is really actually very essential to this. So this part doesn't need to be perfect. Don't stress, don't spend too much time worrying about getting a perfect scoop. Just want to make sure that the scoop is full. That's the first thing that we're going to do. And make sure that they come out of there. And then I'm going to show you how to get that nice shape that we're looking for. In the interest of time, I'm just going to show you these 3 for now. And I'll be able to show you our finished product that we already have. So we've got these little guys here. The great thing is they're not going to spread out a ton. Sometimes you need to allow for a lot of space if whatever baked good you're using, depending on how much sugar and butter and whatnot, they're going to spread out. They're going to spread a little bit, but honestly, not too much. So you want to give some space in between them, but you could probably fit, I would say, between 6 to 8 on one tray, and you'll be totally fine. I would say if you want to do, I was a little bit haphazard with this. So if you want to bring them more to this level of this one here, I don't know what I was thinking. But again, if this is how it looks, like a constellation or something, that's fine. You can do 6. If you line them a little bit neater than I did, you can fit 3 here, 3 in the back, and then 2 kind of in the middle for 8. Again, don't worry. You can put them on multiple trays, pop them all in at the same time. They bake for 9 minutes, so that's really fast when you think about it. So even if you only have 1 tray available, it's totally fine. You know, just do it however many times that you need. I have here a little, just a little bowl of water. That's all it is. I don't know why I needed to show you that, but I guess I'm showing you that it's water. So here what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna make sure I have my paper towel behind me. You can wear gloves if you want, if you don't like touching certain things. Just for the sake of this, nobody but myself is going to eat this. So I'm just going to use my hand just for ease right now. You're just gonna kind of wet your fingertips, just dampen them a little bit. And then let's see if I can show you this a little bit easier. We're just going to pat down. You see how some of these, I'm trying to see here. Okay, so see how this one has like a little bit of a cowlick? We're going to smooth all of those out, and you're just, you know, pretend you're just kind of like patting like a little puppy or something. You don't want to be aggressive, but you don't have to be too precious about it. So we're just going to, and you want to just dampen them. You don't want to soak your fingers, because the more that you moisten the top of these two, it will kind of affect how it bakes, almost kind of dampening it. Again, don't stress. It's not going to taste bad. It's just going to be just a little bit different. And we're going to use this same method to work around the sides too. So that way it's nice and smooth. So we'll just go ahead and do that with these 3, just so you kind of get the idea. I'm trying to see, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. We're just smoothing it out, just patting it. And again, you don't have to go crazy. You don't want to flatten them necessarily, but you just want to take away some of that roundness and more into what you would think the cookie part should kind of look like. So I think these are looking pretty great. Again, you don't need to go crazy. I think it's nice if it has kind of that rustic homemade look, but this is a great hack that you can use to make sure that it doesn't look too homemade and that you look professional. So we've got those, and then they would be good to go into the oven. So we'll pop these over here. We're gonna bake these later because I already have some that are baked so that I can show you the final results in a moment. We're going to switch on over to our Swiss meringue buttercream. So for this, what we're going to do, let's move this guy over just a little bit. We'll take this off because we're going to be using this mixer as well. So this is going to start with, again, your room temperature egg whites. I want to make sure egg whites, no yolks. So that will definitely make a difference. We are going to be whipping them. We're going to be making a meringue. And if you get any egg yolks in there, it will definitely affect it. It will not become as voluminous. It'll kind of tint the color a little bit. You want to avoid those. So what I always recommend doing, luckily this is only a couple ingredients anyway, always crack them, you know, into something separate before adding other things. Or if you already have a bowl with ingredients in it, always make sure that you crack your eggs separately. That way you don't ruin the rest of everything else you've worked on and your ingredients. I'll show you, this calls for 5 egg whites. I have 3 in here so that I can kind of show you 2 different methods to doing it. Hopefully I don't mess up, but if I do, it's okay, life goes on, we're gonna work through it. So we've got our 3 in here so far. So there's 2 kind of things you can do. I'm just gonna pop a glove on for this because they do get pretty slimy. So we've got our kind of traditional, I guess, method. Well, let's crack it here. We've cracked it, and we're just going to kind of toss it between the 2 shells. So we've got our shells there. You can see it already dripping in. And then you just use this as a little basket to catch the yolk. And you just do that only as many times as you need. You don't need to go crazy and get every little drop, because I feel like when you kind of push it a little too far, sometimes the yolk might break along the shell. So only do it until you really feel you've got everything in there. That's one way to do it. Another way, a little bit messier, but another way is cracking the shell and cracking it into your hand. So we're removing one of the shells and we're just putting it in our hand and letting the whites run through our fingers. So this is not my preferred method for a couple reasons. I feel like it's not as effective, but if you are worried about breaking the shell along sharp edges of the shell, then that's another way for you to do it. Either way, we got the results that we wanted, and that is what's really important. The other theme of this episode will be, where is my towel? So here we go. So we've got, we're gonna make our meringue. So we've got, these are our raw egg whites. So we need to cook them to make sure that you do not get sick and these are safe to eat. And that's how we're gonna make our meringue. We're gonna turn, if you have an induction burner or an oven, whatever you've got, you're gonna turn that on. I would say on a low medium heat. You don't want to go too high. You're not looking for a roaring bubble. What we're doing is actually creating a steam double boil effect. So we've got, you can do this however you're comfortable. You can either use a larger bowl, metal or glass, and then make sure you have a pot holder or a towel handy because it's going to get hot. Or just your mixing bowl. But the name of the game here is to make sure we've got about 1 to 2 inches of water that's in our pot right now. We want to make sure that the bottom of this does not touch the water. So you just do a little test. You place it in like that. So it'll have to be smaller than your bowl regardless. You don't want a bigger pot underneath because then it will definitely be submerged. And here, nice and dry. So that's exactly what we're looking for. And we're going to take our sugar and a little dash of salt. I do like 1/4 of a teaspoon. You don't want too much, but I think the little bit of a salt is nice. And we have 1 2/3 cups of sugar here. And we've got our egg whites here. And honestly, couldn't be easier. Just pop them both in there. Now, here's where you're going to also need to just be mindful and have a little bit of attention. So we're going to need to cook this. Our ideal temperature is 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So I have one of these really great digital thermometers. Let's put that on. And then just make sure it is, I don't know the exact conversion for Celsius, so you might have to Google that for the exact conversion, but these have it already if you need to toggle between the two. So whatever, if you're working with Celsius, that is. Fahrenheit, it's gonna be 160. So these are great. You just submerge these and it's going to give you your temperature. If you don't have one of these, a candy thermometer is great too. But another little hack, if you don't have either, what you want to do is, this isn't, again, it's only going to, we only want it to get to 160 degrees. So warm for sure, but not scorching hot. You can kind of tap your finger, again, if you're not like serving these to loads of other people, you can tap your finger inside the mixture and you want to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of work in between your fingers, and you want to make sure that there are no grains of the sugar. So it's nice and smooth, almost like a face mask or something like that. I'm sure that this could potentially make an excellent face mask. I don't really know. Again, don't quote me on this. We're going to want to start kind of occasionally stirring this. It's a little bit hard initially because the sugar and the egg white together are quite thick. So you're just kind of, as it's heating up, just working it out. And then once it starts, not that it's going to completely thin out, but it's going to become a little bit easier to work with because some of that sugar is going to be dissolving into the mixture. Then you're going to want to whisk it even more, and only though until that either that temperature is at 160, or if you're doing the little in the between the, I gotta come up with like, if anybody knows of like what I'm trying to say, feel free to drop it in the chat and let me know what kind of a method that is or what that feels or sounds like to you. But kind of just, I don't know, in between your fingers. I really don't know, I'm blanking right now. So if anybody wants to help me out, I would be very appreciative. So I'll kind of, well, at the risk of spilling any, I'm not gonna exactly, I don't know, I'm feeling daredevil-y. Can we see? Not that much, not without spilling it out. But just trust me, this is kind of like, let's see if you can kind of, yeah, it's like a thick slime is what I'm getting here. So that's fine, that's what you want, because what we're going to do afterwards is we're going to pop this onto our stand mixer, and that's where the magic's really going to happen. So I'm still visually seeing grains of the sugar so far, so we know that we're not quite there yet. So we're going to want to work this out a little bit more, and then just, you know, with the heat as well, it's going to heat up. Yeah, our pot is nice and hot, so it's doing what it needs to. We can just kind of see how much further we might need to go. Let's see what our thermometer tells us in a minute. But what we'll do after this is I will show you how to make the meringue part. And if you choose, since really this is how you make a meringue in general, you can have that good to go, and you can use that as a filling if that's as far as you want to go. So again, like I said, let's make things easy. Let's make life easy and delicious. So you can just stop there if you like, and that's totally fine. And then I'm just going to walk you through, since it couldn't be easier, the other steps of making it the official Swiss meringue buttercream. Again, just like when we were doing our alternating ingredients, into our wet ingredients and dry ingredients for the cookies. It just requires a little bit of patience with the whole process. So let's see here. We're going to turn this up just a little bit so we can get things moving and grooving a little bit. But like I said, you don't want to turn your heat up too much. We don't need a roaring bubble, but we do want this to kind of get all nice and dissolved and incorporated. And then if you really want to hack the whole system, you can get some marshmallow fluff or marshmallow cream, either wherever you choose to get it, or if it's from us. And then you only need to worry about the baking the cookie part. So, all right, this is looking pretty nice. We're not quite there yet, but our sugar is starting to dissolve, which is exactly what we want. And again, it is a little bit of a process, but I do promise you that it will be so worth it in the end. All right, we'll grab our thermometer again, and we'll just see how we're doing. I am definitely seeing a difference. It is becoming, see, when I pick it up, it's even thinner. So that's great. You don't want it super thin, of course, but we know that we're making progress. It's always good to have those little benchmarks that you know that you're going the right route and you're not off the rails. So this is great. Our temperature is moving up. It's popping up and up and up. We're cruising past 135. We're approaching 140. So this is great. This is, obviously we're making progress. All right. We're moving toward, sometimes too what happens, and this is just the magic of science and cooking and baking. Sometimes what happens is we get a little bit impatient and we want things to just happen. And we're like, gosh, why isn't this going any faster? And just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, our temperature will just pop. And so you always want to keep an eye on things too, because sometimes it can just start shooting up. So let's just stir this a little longer, not too much, but I also want to make sure that we are getting all of our sugar incorporated so that we're not left with any grains. Again, you want to scrape down the sides. I think that's a common theme here of everything that we've been doing. You just want to make sure that everything is incorporated, and that's going to be the best thing. So I've just got a little bit of sputtering going on with the water from underneath. That's no cause for alarm. That's totally fine. You can turn it down if you want to, but you really don't need to. It's okay. It's just water. And as long as it's not getting on you and hurting you, you're totally fine. So we're just going to take the temperature one more time. I kind of feel like we are just about where we need to be. So let's watch the numbers go up. We're approaching 150. We are, oh my gosh, I'm getting excited. You guys, we made it. All right, so we're gonna turn that off and we're just gonna remove it. Once it's at 160, you can just remove it right away. You don't need to do anything fancy. I turned off my induction burner. You can turn off your stove if that is what you're doing. Again, I wish I could really show you in a nice way, but this bowl is in such a way where it's just gonna end up and all on the floor and all our work is done. But you can see how much thinner it is than it was when we had that initial mixture going before it really heated up. So easy breezy. I'm just gonna pop this right into your stand mixer. We had and I'm sorry if I didn't mention this before, we had a paddle attachment before for our cake batter, which looks like this. And I prefer that when you're making a cake batter or a cookie dough or something like that. It's a bit less fragile, of course, and just the way that it whips and creams the butter together, I prefer that. But for something like this, we want our whisk attachment. So we're just gonna pop that on. And this is going to make our meringue. Again, always start slowly. We don't want anything. It is still 160 degrees, so while that's not scalding, you just want to avoid certain things if you can. It might be a little bit loud. Once we get to a bit of a thicker consistency. Sometimes this can take a number of minutes. It just really depends. Now, the other thing that you want to be mindful of too is if you are choosing to do the Swiss Meringue Buttercream, and if you are game for it, I highly recommend, if you've had Swiss Meringue Buttercream, perhaps you agree with me. If you haven't, or if you're not sure if you have, definitely give it a shot. It's just super delicious. It's my most favorite type of frosting for a cake, and it's so worth it at the end. But what we want to make sure is that once we're making this meringue, you can feel the bowl, and it's hot. It's not warm, you know, it's hot. It's not gonna burn my hands off, but it's definitely hot. Before we add the butter, which makes it the buttercream portion of the Swiss meringue buttercream. So this is the Swiss meringue on its own. And that is just the method in that we're making it. There's a French meringue, there's an Italian meringue, and it's just the process that you're doing it. There are, of course, the meringues that you can bake in the oven, and those you do not need to heat up the egg whites like we did, because you are baking them in the oven instead, making that safe. Here, we are cooking them because we're whipping them, and then they're going to be ready to use. So you can use this, gosh, you can use this, I mean, on a spoon, or you can, we're gonna turn this up a little bit too, because now it's getting glossier and a little bit thicker. And I'm actually gonna turn it up almost all the way to full speed, which is going to do two things. And then I'll tell you about the fun ways that you can eat meringue on its own. Is going to do two things. This is going to whip all of that air into it. So a lot of times you'll hear about soft peaks, you know, medium peaks and things like that. That's where our meringue is kind of holding its form and shape. So we want to make sure that we're pumping all of that great air into that, so it's making them light and fluffy and voluminous. But then also, this is cooling our meringue down. So multi-beneficial, right? So that's what we want. We want this to be able to be nice and cool, you know, or room temperature. It's obviously not going to get cold. But before you add any of that butter in there, it needs to be exactly where it's at, which we're going to get it there. And then I'll just tell you how to add the butter in, because that also takes a little bit of time. And we want to cruise along so you can see the final product, of course. We're almost done. So if anybody does have to leave, don't worry. You can watch this recording later, or you can follow the instructions. I do hope that they are easy to follow along. I always try to make any steps very user-friendly. I don't like to use a lot of technical terms or things that can be deemed as intimidating. I think that everybody should, you know, take all of those equations out of the kitchen and incorporate them when they want. So if you want to get really fancy at your own speed, amen. If not, let's get down to basics. So I'm going to stop this just for a second, just so you can kind of see. I know you didn't get to totally see what it looked like before, but it did not look like that, I promise you. So right now what we have, you know what, this is looking pretty nice. How fun is that? It looks like soft serve. It certainly did not look like that before, right? It was like goopy and messy. This is not leaving its home. So this is looking pretty awesome, actually. This is a really nice consistency. I kind of like this a lot. You could go a little bit longer just if you want it on your own, but I would say for sure it's warm, but it's certainly not as hot as it was before. So truly, when you whip that air into it, it really does help cool things down. So what you want to do is just give it a test, and that's just really it. Just kind of touch the side of the bowl. Make sure it's not the top, because the top's going to be more room temperature. You want the base where all the good stuff is, and you just want to be able to touch that and make sure that it is cool to the touch, room temperature. You don't want it warm, again, because when you add that butter in, which we'll go over right now, it's going to make a soupy mess. So there are things you can do to rectify that. So let's just jump into that real quick. And then our final moments, just in a moment, is going to be just showing you how to assemble the whoopie pies. So we've got our meringue here. And again, it's a matter of minutes. So once it gets nice and room temperature to the touch, you'll have your butter, room temperature as well. Doesn't need to be melted, but you don't want it super cold either, because you want this to incorporate really nicely and smoothly into it. You're gonna cut it into kind of 1/4 of an inch, maximum 1/2 inch little pads of butter. You don't need to go super thin, but I would recommend somewhere around the 1/4 inch mark, because then it's just going to incorporate a lot easier and faster for you and not get stuck with chunks or anything like that. And you're just going to drop a little bit into there until you don't see it anymore, until you see it's incorporated. So again, it is a bit of butter. So you want to just, you know, be patient, give it that time. And do not be alarmed. What's going to kind of happen is it's going to look kind of, not liquidy, but it's going to look a little bit softened. And then, just like I said, just like magic, all of a sudden it's going to look like this just luscious buttercream. Now, if for some reason by completion of adding all of your butter, it's not looking exactly how you want it to, and it's looking a little bit like soupy, you can pop that into the refrigerator, time it for about 5 to 10 minutes. You don't need to leave it in there super, super long. Bring it back out and pop it back on here, and then whip that up again. What I'll also mention is, after we make our meringue like this, change out your paddle attachment. So make sure you either have another one, or you just clean this one off before using it again when you start adding the butter. So you're gonna swap out this this whisk attachment for your paddle attachment. Just kind of think like when you're dealing with butter and whipping, you just want to use that paddle attachment, and that's going to make that Swiss meringue buttercream. So I have some prepared already, and what we're going to do is assemble them, the best part. So the magic of television, we have our shells here. So here's how they look, here's how they baked. You can see that they are not like those little mounds that they started, but again, they didn't spread out a ton. This is the exact portion that we did before. And so they have the nice little flattened bottom there. Let's see if I can put it up against the white so you can see, and just a little bit of the dome. So we've got lots of sets of these. So you want to always put the frosting on the flat side. I know it might seem counterintuitive that you want to place them down on the flat side, but it is very cute and nice when they both have that matching rounded side. So we're going to leave them open. We've got a piping bag. If you do not have a piping bag, if you have a plastic bag, that is wonderful. If you do not have a plastic bag, that's okay. You can take a little spatula, you can take a spoon or a knife and just kind of spread it on there. Again, whatever's easy for you. But if you're into the presentation of everything, having a piping bag or a Ziploc bag is great. So I have our Swiss meringue buttercream here. So it's, how shall I describe it? It looks like fluffy, light and fluffy, beautiful kind of butter almost, because really it is butter and sugar, but it is delicious. And again, the best part is it is not terribly sweet. So I think that's the one thing you'll keep hearing about Swiss meringue buttercream, is just the texture of it and the fact that it's not too sweet. It just really makes it so that you can have a really enjoyable dessert without feeling like you need to visit your dentist right afterward. So we've got this in our piping bag. And when it comes to cutting this, gosh, I wish I could exactly tell you a size. You can always start smaller and take off more, but if you take off too much, you cannot return. So here it's very small margin for error. So I would say start with maybe about 1.5 inches. Again, we're not doing super precise things, so it doesn't have to be that serious. We're just going to get it out there, and we're just going to work it around. Again, so 2 things to remember. Your meringue, you want that at room temperature before adding the butter. And that whole mixture afterward will be absolutely perfect in temperature at that point. these guys, little cakey cookies, you want to make sure those are at room temperature before adding this, or else this is going to become soup. So then, let's see if I can show you. Here, again, it doesn't have to be that fancy, but just it gives you those nice direction here. And you can go up high, you can be more conservative, whatever you like, but that's it. And then we've got the top here. And isn't she lovely? So they're just so cute, handheld, delicious. And like I said, this whole mixture will get you plenty to fill all of your whoopie pies and then some. So I hope that covered everything. I do think so. If you are choosing not to eat them all at once, which might be hard, but if you are choosing to save some, what I recommend is pop the rest of your Swiss meringue buttercream in an airtight container, and you can refrigerate that for about up to a week. If you're not serving them to other people, you can test it yourself, but this stuff holds up pretty well. But I would say try and use it within a week or so, separately. And you can take your shells and you could refrigerate those for about the same amount of time, or you could freeze them for up to a couple months. And then all you need to do is just bring them back out and just let them get to room temperature, and they're ready to use too. So if you want to separate, have some to eat now and then some at a later date, you can totally do that and enjoy them on another time. So I think those are all my tips and tricks. And I do believe that we covered all the bases, but I want to see, let me check the chat right now. I'm gonna hop around. Okay, can this recipe be made non-dairy? Any suggested substitutions for the butter and buttermilk? Oh, a big debate is origins. Pennsylvania or Maine? Oh, that's great. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm gonna look it up because I'm curious now. So that can be an ongoing debate, I suppose. As for a non-dairy version, personally, I don't make them non-dairy. I'm not the pro at that necessarily. There are margarine and vegan butter substitutes, but what I've come into contact with for certain things is sometimes you need a combination. So it's not just necessarily a one-to-one substitution just because of the chemical composition of it. So that would definitely be something though that you could look up. I know that there are a lot of fabulous vegan bloggers and bakers out there that are going to tell you the exact proportions that you can use. So I don't see why not. It just requires some just substitutions and different ingredients. So I will definitely not say no. I absolutely feel like this is something you could do dairy-free. I, for one, am just not the expert in that, so I'm not going to pretend that I am, but I definitely do think that is something that you can absolutely achieve. Let's see here. Is this somewhat like a devil dog cake part? Yeah, it's similar. So you've got like that kind of, like I call it a cakey cookie component and that cream filling. So I would say it's a very similar composition to that. Can you break and freeze the cookies to fill later? So cool. I'm glad you asked. I went over that just now, but in short, yes. Just eat what you want right away, and then do not worry about assembling all of them at once, and you can separate the two. So refrigerate or freeze the shells, and you can refrigerate the Swiss meringue buttercream separately, and then just make sure they both come to room temperature, and you'll be able to enjoy them whenever you want. Oh, Tony, thank you. Doing a great job. Thanks. Sometimes I get nervous that, we don't always know what everybody's able to see. Do you make other cake flavors? Personally, I love this, but I am going to make up, I love carrot cake. So if there are any carrot cake lovers with like a cream cheese frosting, like it's basically like having your own little individual carrot cakes, but cuter and handheld. So you can find different recipes online as well for different variations, different flavors. But I would definitely not just do substitutions or add anything too aggressively. Again, you just don't want to affect the consistency of your batter. So just make sure that you find a recipe that works for you. But yes, absolutely. Can we order t-shirts? Oh gosh, what kind? Like this one? If this is what you mean, I don't have any Whoopie Pie t-shirts, but if you want one like this, stay tuned. This is a sweatshirt. So we'll probably have these up on the site as the weather gets a little bit cooler. Right now we have beanies and caps and pins, which are super cute. It has the logo on there too. But if you guys are interested in this, please like DM on Instagram at Squish Marsh, or shoot an email over hello@squishmarshmallows.com. Visit the site, squishmarshmallows.com, fill out the contact form. And if you are interested, if we have enough interest, we'll do some different colors, some different like hoodies, crew necks. So yes, so thank you for that. All right. Also, thank you to all the people who said thank you and who enjoyed. When would you add cocoa for a chocolate Swiss buttercream? At the end. So you don't want to add certain ingredients too far in advance. Once you've got the base going, if you wanted to make it into a chocolate, or if you want to use some freeze-dried fruits and do it as a fruit flavor, or add some, you know, cinnamon or spice, all that stuff can go at the very, very end. You can even kind of just fold it in there, and it doesn't need to mix too much in there. You just want to incorporate it, but not deflate the batter. So if you want to add flavorings or things like that, at the end is when you're going to want to do it. All right. Oh, we have another question about the non-dairy, or wait, maybe I'm just rereading some of these. I apologize. How many cookies does the recipe yield with a small ice cream scoop? So if you use the kind that I was using, which is approximately 2 tablespoons, I would say, or just this, if you have one of those cookie scoops itself, I've found that I can make about more than a dozen shells of that size. I would say about 16 shells, something like that. If you make some a little bit bigger, obviously less. So that'll give you about 8 Whoopie Pies. So it's not an aggressive amount, but it's perfect and delightful. You can even cut them in half and, you know, share with whoever you're maybe sheltering in place with. All right, does it make a difference if your mixer doesn't have a paddle attachment? So again, like I said, for this kind of stuff, you can definitely get by with the whisk attachment. It's no problem. It's just my preference to use the paddle attachment, just for the result that you're going to get, but that certainly doesn't mean that you're not going to get it with the whisk attachment. Again, because the ingredients that we're using and the results that we're getting are of a certain consistency, which is not quite as aggressive as a cookie dough or something like that. Certainly not a bread. That you would not, because then it's going to be too aggressive and too tough for the whisk attachment. But if you don't have one, no worries. It's going to be fine. You're going to get a wonderful result. It's going to be perfect. So yes, you may use what you have. Yes, love the marshmallow t-shirt. Okay, yay. So stay tuned. My shell's cracked on top. Do you know why that would happen? Let's see. I wish I could see how much they cracked. So what I will say, now that I'm closer to you guys, they're not going to be like completely smooth and pristine. I know they are a bit darker, but I do think we can see. So I don't know if that's kind of what you got, but it does have some character to it. They're not going to be perfectly polished and perfectly smooth, and that kind of gives it, you know, its character. But yes, they will be a little bit like a crackle, not split down the middle or anything like that. It's still going to be smooth, but it does have that. So if yours does resemble that, then do not worry. You've got it right. If that's what yours looks like. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So sorry I didn't include that, but yeah, not to worry. They're not going to be, I don't know, if you see some recipes, you know, and photos online. They've probably been smoothed out and photoshopped, whatever, to look more beautiful. But you can definitely find some other ones online too that really show the character. That's what they're gonna look like, and that's totally fine. I think I think I hopefully reached all of your questions. If I didn't, and you have any really quickly you want to pop in, go for it. If not, mine didn't get a big dome. Okay, were they kind of like flattened out? I would say these aren't very elevated. They are relatively flat. But then I guess it just kind of depends on how you were kind of tamping them down before popping them in the oven. If they were a little too flat, they're going to be more like disc-like. But honestly, I mean, as long as they taste good and they're not going on a photo shoot, I think you're gonna be fine. I would say that the big thing is just make sure that they taste nice. And if they're baked enough, then I think you're good to go. If you guys have any more last minute questions, feel free to pop them in the chat below. But if not, and you have questions later, or if you decide to make this later and you have any questions at all, you can DM. I love a DM, and any ideas, feedback, anything like that. Send pics too. If you baked these, please send photos or post them to your social and tag us, Squish Marsh or Squish Marshmallows on Facebook. I would love to see them and love to repost any of them. Yeah, it doesn't look like any new questions are coming through, so I think that might mean you guys are set. So again, thank you guys so much for joining and for being a part of this and spending your time with me. I really appreciate it. And if anybody is or wants or able to donate to Squish, then you can do that from the links that were provided in the chat. Or again, the Venmo is at Katherine Sprung, just one word, and the PayPal is paypal.me/squishmarsh. And I want to thank Girls Night In Online so much for having me, and for all of you guys. Thank you so much. This was so much fun for me. I hope you guys got something out of this. And if you didn't make them today, I hope that they turn out amazing next time.